Hi everybody, I'm Nicole Vulcan, editor of the Source Weekly. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Nicole. I'm Cheri Helt. I'm the state representative for House District 54, which encompasses Bend. And I am also running for re-election for this position.
So tell us why you're running.
I am running to be the moderate independent voice for Bend, who brings to the table business experience of owning a small business in Bend for 16 years, as well as my school board experience for over 8 years.
Thanks. So we are doing this interview outside. We're taking some extra precautions right now. We're going to talk about a number of issues that are facing Oregon, of which we have many. But the biggest one right now is the coronavirus. What's your take on how the state has handled the coronavirus response and also the legislature's response to the coronavirus?
Well, first I want to thank you for the opportunity to adapt and overcome the COVID virus and be able to interview with you in a safe and socially distanced way. And so we as business owners are doing the same thing in our business, adapting and overcoming all of the time to try and make sure that we can safely serve our customers and our staff. And so I think that you guys are doing a great job in doing that. The coronavirus has been a huge hurdle, and I like to say out of the worst of times comes the best of times. This is a real opportunity for us to recreate and reinvent and reimagine a lot of things that have been brought up by the coronavirus. The beginning of the coronavirus pandemic was mostly around healthcare and making sure we had access to appropriate PPE levels, making sure we had testing supplies that were appropriate, and ventilators for our hospital system. And I spent a lot of time as a state legislator doing that work in conjunction with St. Charles and our public health officials to make sure that we were prepared as a community to handle whatever happened in our community safely and make sure that we could prevent loss of life in Deschutes County and Bend. And so that was the beginning. And then now we have an economic crisis that has sort of paralleled the healthcare crisis. And so we have had response of, the PPP loans, which have helped our economy and stabilized our small businesses. And we've seen that in the revenue forecast that came out yesterday on how much that support was imperative to making sure Bend looks like Bend when we get out of this COVID crisis. And so there has been a lot of response to the COVID crisis and a lot of factors and layers that have presented themselves. But I remember you saying you wanted this to last a half an hour. So if we're going to talk in depth about it, I'm going to request 3.5 hours to do that.
Uh-oh. Are we ready for that? I don't know if we're ready for that.
Well, if you are, I am.
Well, I want to talk about the piece that is probably pretty salient for a lot of people right now, and that's the economic recovery. What's the single most important thing that the state legislature can do right now to help mitigate the damage that's going to inevitably come?
Well, one of the things that's really important is supporting our economy, because our economy essentially supports all of the social services that we hold near and dear to our heart, like education. And so we really need to support our small businesses, and I bring a lot of experience in that area to the table, having owned small businesses in Central Oregon for the last 16 years, along with my husband. And we so happen to be the most hit economic sector of those small businesses, which is the restaurant industry and the hospitality industry. Our hospitality industry in Oregon provides 200,000 jobs, and so this is a really imperative part of our economy for the state of Oregon, and so we need to support our small businesses. You go to Home Depot and Target and they're all doing fine. Their stock prices are great, but when you look at the businesses that are on Bond and Wall and in the old mill, they're struggling, and we are having a hard time, and we're all recreating what we do to make sure we serve people safe and effectively and make sure we're taking care of our staff. It's really important that we are able to provide jobs for employees and benefits for employees so that they can pay their rent and they can provide food at their tables. And we as a state need to make sure that we provide that support. Currently, there is a program that the City of Bend has put in place with the Chamber of Commerce to put out $1 million worth in short-term loans and grants for our small businesses locally, and we are going to need to do more of that. As fall comes in, we are going to see a different type of economic reality because of the cooling off of the weather and not being able to do things outside. One of the reasons we're able to adapt and overcome with this interview so easily today is that it's warm. I'm in a turtleneck. It's not warm, but it is warm enough. And as we get into snowy weather, that's going to eliminate a lot of the things that our small businesses have been able to do to accommodate safe working conditions for their customers and their staff.
So how does the legislature play into that?
Well, we need to have the economic support to have grants and loans, and we also need to look at regulations that may cause overburdensome things that would inhibit the ability to perform, the business that we're doing at hand.
Mm-hmm. So on top of the coronavirus, we've just gone through and are still going through a massive fire event in the state. What's your stance on how to manage wildfire risk in the state at the legislative level? And what specific actions do you propose or are you working on?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to thank our firefighters and our first responders that have been our heroes through this crisis. They have put themselves and their lives at risk to save others, and that is just, my heart goes out to them, and I just want to give them a deep gratitude of thanks. I also want to send my condolences to all the families who have lost loved ones and lost their homes, and let them know that we're here to help with rebuilding efforts and make sure that their schools are whole again. There are many of my friends that I have made through Oregon School Boards Association that have been affected by this crisis, especially in the school district in Southern Oregon. And so that has lost the most school buildings, which is the Phoenix Talent School District. And so we have that rebuilding effort, but we do need to have better forest practices in place. And a lot of those are dependent on the fact that forest lands are owned by the federal forest lands, they're owned by private forest lands, and they're owned by state forest lands, and then there's some city and county as well. And so whenever you have layers of policies, it becomes more difficult to manage. And I think what we need to be looking towards is the work that Mayor Sally Russell is doing with the Districts Collaborative Project and has done for years. I think that in our area, we were able to step up our forest practices after the Paradise Fire, and we've done more prescribed burns. And I know that we don't like those because the air quality does tend to take a little bit of a dip, but it is imperative. I call them the vaccines for our forests to make sure that we can prevent large forest fires and remove the heavy fuels. But we need to have some thinning practices that are safe and that will support our forest health in the long term. And so we need to look at thinning practices and prescribed burn practices and make sure that we have laws where we are allowing federal and state and local governments to work together on those practices. And we've passed a few of those in the past session on having a good neighbor policy with the federal government and allowing the state to put out forest fires on federal lands, which was not able to be done before that.
So kind of baked into that is the fact that there's been a lot of conversation around the last few sessions and the desire from the Democrats to pass the climate change legislation. There was several walkouts, which I know you did not participate in the last time or the time before.
Nope, I want to be clear, I have never participated in a walkout. I don't believe my constituents or my voters have ever sent me to Salem to walk out. I reject the idea of a walkout. I reject the idea of a litmus test. Single issue litmus tests are not something I participate in. I'm there to vote yes or no, and I will do so. So from your position as a Republican working within your party, what is your take on how we can prevent another walkout to
help us prevent the stymieing of not just that legislation, but other legislation that, by some arguments could have supported and helped mitigate the things that we're dealing with now with the fires?
Well, I think that's what I'm running for, is to be more collaborative and be able to reach across the aisle. I've developed really strong relationships with a lot of my colleagues. Representative Helm, I have a call with him tomorrow on a policy to increase the ability to put more solar in our state. Karen Power, I was on a call with her yesterday. She's the Democrat from Milwaukee that introduced all of the cap and trade legislation. We've been working really hard on childcare, which is a really, really imperative issue. When you talk about getting our economy back on track, we need to invest in our childcare facilities and make sure our childcare workers are able to have living wages. So that's real imperative, and I've been working with that. But I think that it is a bipartisan, collaborative effort, and we need to build trust amongst each other and work together. What we need to do is be rejecting the right and left rigid extremes of our polarized society and really working in the middle where we all want to be, and with logical policies. There is truth in both sides. We have climate change. It's scientifically proven, and we need to stop having that litigated. We need to move forward with things that help eliminate climate change. And we also, at the same time, need to move forward with forest practices that help manage our forests and thin our forests so that we're taking out the fuels that cause these extensive hot temperatures. And we need to reject these rigid right-left conversations where they're either or. They are an and. We have to have climate change mitigation, and we have to have good forest practices. And that's how we change the conversation. We have moderate elected officials who are not afraid to tell their party no. And I have stood up to my party and have had a lot of criticism for that, but I don't mind doing that because I know that this is what's right for our community and what is right for Oregon and what's right for our climate. And so that's where I stand and where I will continue to stand. But we need more people that are willing to do that.
So during the last walkout, there was a pretty big push with timber unity. Some have said those are, identified those as really being out-of-state groups or larger corporations that are influencing that movement. What's your opinion on the out-of-state corporate timber industry in Oregon, and what would you do to make them more accountable to Oregon communities?
The timber folks that I am familiar with are all from Oregon and live in Oregon and care deeply about our forests and our forest management practices. And I think we need to bring our Oregon forestry and logging industry to the table to be talking about what these practices are, because they know what the practices are to help thin and also bring our environmentalists to the table so that we can have real conversations. Because what happens is, I learned from my years on the school board, you always bring everybody together, and when you do, you end up with better solutions. The solutions that don't work and that are polarizing, that we all get frustrated with, are either very far right or very far left. And we can reject that conversation and have moderate middle ground conversations that are logical and bring policies together. But we need to bring both sides to the table to have those conversations. And I think that's completely possible.
Thanks. What proposals would you support to tackle reducing emissions in the state, if not the sweeping legislation that's been introduced in recent sessions?
So in the last session, I broke with my party to vote for the dirty diesel bill, which was to remove dirty diesels from our roadways, and that used the Volkswagen money to support doing that. And I think that is really a great first step in moving emissions down. I also think that supporting solar is a really great thing for the east side of the mountains. And I am working again with Representative Helm on that. And I've put forward a bill. This week is our deadline to put bills forward. And so I've been working feverishly hard to try and get as many bills started that I can, so that we can get a collaborative process over Zoom, right, over the next few months, because we need to have people from both sides of the aisle working on a lot of these solutions that are going to be imperative to get us out of a deep recession, to get us out of climate change effects that we're experiencing. And one of the bills that I'm putting forward is to change some land use around land that is not really useful but has a lot of regulations on it, to put more solar on that. And so that would remove some of the emissions from fossil fuels to create electricity. So those are the few of the things that I would say off the top of my head, but I'm working collaboratively with my counterparts on the other side of the aisle to do that, and I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. So yet another challenge that we have seen this year is just a reintroduction of the conversation around police brutality and police accountability. I know the legislature passed a number of initiatives in the last session, the short session. What else do you think the legislature is responsible for doing or should do next?
Well, I really would like to highlight some of that work.
Okay.
We have our BIPOC caucus that has worked with our sheriffs and our police departments, and we brought forward a lot of bills, and I voted for all of the bills that were brought forward, and I think that those will make a lot of change. I think that one of the most important ones was to help with the union negotiations that were allowed to take away disciplines for racism, and I think that that is a huge step forward, and so I was really proud to support that along with a lot of the other legislation. But again, back to my other point of making sure that we have both sides at the table, and that is really where we get thoughtful legislation. And did I answer the question, or did I?
It was just what's next in terms of the legislature's role in handling police accountability and brutality?
Well, and I think we have to keep working with our police force and keep working with our communities of color to make sure that everyone's served. And I think, again, we have to make sure that this is an and conversation. We can have law and order, and we can have minority communities supported. We can have both, and we should have both. We should be able to have protests, and we should be able to have law and order. They're not an either-or conversation. These are things that we have to have both, and we value them as a society. And so we can support minorities, and we can have law and order and support our police.
So we're going to jump around again. We're just jumping all over the place in this interview today.
This is great. I'm going to take a little drink.
There you go. Oregon ranks the worst in the nation for both a high prevalence of mental illness and low access to care, and has one of the highest rates of addiction nationwide. What can an Oregon representative do to reverse those trends?
Yeah, those are really important statistics, and we have failed as a state in those areas, and we really need to do better. We need to invest money into our treatment programs. I believe with the revenue from the marijuana income, we could do a lot around treatment and access to treatment. And as that revenue stream forms and increases, I think that that should be something that we should really look at dedicating to our treatment of addiction and mental health. Mental health treatment and addiction treatment more times than not go hand in hand, so they should be discussed together, and policies should be written to move them together because we'll have more impact that way. And we really just need to make sure that we prioritize having that part of our healthcare system and really moving our CCOs to invest in mental health and our communities in that way. And I've started that work when I was on the school board. I worked with our Tri-County area to get our counties and our school districts and our CCOs to pay for mental health counselors inside of our schools by splitting it in a three-way type fashion. And I believe that they finally got a grant for that last year to be able to do some of that work. And so I think that we just have to be creative and really hone into our priorities of helping people that need help. And we can't settle for being last in anything. We really need to change that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Another challenge, ongoing, less chronic or less acute and more chronic, is affordable housing in Oregon. What initiatives do you support or ideas do you have around that coming from the legislature?
Can I say one more thing about the last thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, so around substance abuse also, in the legislature we took away a lot of the small crimes that are sending people into our court systems around marijuana convictions and low-level drug addictions, which I voted for to remove those. And that money now should be redirected into treatment. Because one of the ways that we were treating addiction was through our court systems, which has the worst outcomes and is the most expensive way to do so. And so redirecting some of those, now that we have done that work, we can now do some of the redirection. And I think that that's also really important, as well as our 24-hour, 23-hour and 57-minute sobering centers, which we now have open in our county, which is a really big first step in moving that forward.
And then on to affordable housing. I don't know if you want to recap anything that's happened in your time in the legislature thus far, or just talk about other ideas that you have to support affordable housing.
So can I get 3 hours again for this one?
I know.
So affordable housing has been an issue that I've been working on since I've been on the school board. Many people wouldn't think that the school board could affect affordable housing, and I'm here to tell you that they can. We were able to remove some properties off of our tax rolls, which with our funding system in Oregon is a real hard decision as a school board member. But we can't have great schools without affordable housing. And so we did that, and we now have the Asmuth project in Northwest Crossing that is open and has affordable housing because of that choice, that decision that we have made. And so that is really great to see that come to fruition, as well as they're building another project on the canal that was also removed at the same time. So those are some things that I've done in the past as a school board member, because this is near and dear to my heart. This is not a new bandwagon that I am jumping on. This is a long-term problem that I think Bend has faced. And in the state legislature, I have come up with a creative solution and to remove the employment designation off of the 3rd Street corridor. So on the buildings along 3rd Street, there's an employment designation that only allows the buildings to be used for employment purposes. This removing that designation and working with the city of Bend to figure out how that needs to be done so that it can be done thoughtfully in planning and moving forward, we were able to remove that designation and create a multi-use designation. So you can now use that land along 3rd Street to be able to build multi-use housing with employment underneath. So you could still have employment and, you know, how many ever stories are allowed depending on which portion of the city code that you are under. So that is a big step forward, and I'm really looking forward to when people do those projects, because those are not only could be affordable, but could also be very livable and walkable, and removing cars and allowing people to walk to work and walk to activities and fun and grocery store. And then also I worked collaboratively with the City of Bend again and the mayor and our Department of State Lands to get the Stevens Road property tract sold. That property was a property that has been inside the UGB for 13 years and owned by the Department of State Lands. And I had multiple conversations with them that if you're going to designate where we have the ability to grow, then we need the ability to grow there. And so after 6 months of weekly meetings, we finally came to an agreement that it was time to sell that land, and that was a real collaborative process, again with Mayor Russell and the City of Bend. And we now have that property sold, and that's 382 acres that is sold, and will have up to 1,700 homes on it. And I believe that we have to address the supply of housing to really address the affordability. We're 31,000 homes every year short in the state of Oregon for supply, and that causes our increase of housing costs. Our housing cost in August has went over 500 and I think
39.
Sorry, I love having a desk and this and writing
a desk
my notes.
and no wind just blowing around to mess up your papers.
Yeah, I have it somewhere here. It's $530 some dollars, or $529,000 in August was the statistic that I have, and so that just screams out that we need more supply. So I was really pleased to work collaboratively, with everyone to get that project into fruition, and so I'm excited to see that happen and bring down some of our costs by increasing our supply.
Mm-hmm. There's been a proposal to introduce a state real estate sales tax or property tax on homes over $500,000. Do you support that? And anything else you want to add about that?
I really think the way to address our affordable housing supply is with supply and being more creative about getting more investments from our federal government and our state government into affordable housing. And when I mean affordable housing, I mean truly affordable housing. And I don't believe that we can tax our way out of that. And I'm also very concerned about that because we just talked about that the median home price is now $529,000. So you would be taxing and adding more cost onto those already ridiculously high housing rates. And so I think we really have to look at density. We have to look at land that we can be creative with and how we can do that with our Department of State Lands. And I have some ideas on that, and I've been working with Representative Clem, who is a Democrat out of Salem, on a proposal, and we had a bill in for 420 affordable homes off of the outside of the UGB on the Stevens Road track as well. And so I'm looking forward to working with him again and bringing that back forward. But I really think we're going to have to be really creative, and I don't support taxing our median priced homes for affordable housing.
Thanks. Moving to homelessness, which is an extension of the conversation we're already having. Would you vote for a homelessness state of emergency? And what other initiatives do you support to help people without homes?
So homelessness has been an area that I think we've talked about many times with my youth homeless bill that I have brought forward 6 times now in my short 2 years of being in office. I refuse to let that one go. So anytime I can submit a bill, I make sure that we submit that. And I have been submitting that with my my friend Alyssa Kenny Geyer, who is a Democrat from Portland, and we are working on that together to fund our homeless youth. Our homeless youth are funded at 92 cents a day in the state of Oregon, and that is just unconscionable. Through the pandemic, we have lost beds and shelters have closed for our homeless youth, and we really have to change that investment. We need to invest in our youth. I've worked with Speaker Kotek on 4001, which was an investment into helping our homeless with a $50 million investment, and also changing some of the restrictions and code restrictions to take away the burden and cost to be able to relieve some of that, to get housing shelters put into place. Those shelters We were able to pass the policy portion of that bill in the first short session, so that is in place. And I also amended the bill that we put forward in the first short session to include veterans. I did that because I've been working collaboratively locally with Counselor Barb Campbell, Counselor Bruce Abernathy, and all of our county commissioners, our COVO team with JW and Kathy, and our Bend Heroes Foundation with Sam and Eric Tobiasen, to bring forward a shelter that will be 15 tiny homes with wraparound services for our veterans. And we're going to be able to do that with the code relaxments that we've been able to put through on that 4001, and with that collaborative team. It's been quite an honor to work with that team. It's a very diverse team, but the thing that I have found in my time in office on the school board and in the state legislature is that everybody is willing to work collaboratively. The thing that you need to find is what is the unifying topic that you want to work on with people. And Barb Campbell and I are really strong on helping fix homelessness, along with Bruce Abernathy and our counselors and COVO and the Bend Heroes Foundation. And we're going to get that project moving. We got $150,000 from the county to get it going, and hopefully we can get it done as soon as possible. And we are really excited to do that. But those kind of collaborative projects that we can work on together and really make a change for our community and change the dynamic of what homelessness means and how to get people lifted up and back into society is going to be very rewarding work. And I'm proud to be part of those teams that are doing some of that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot more we could discuss on that, but that is definitely a bright spot.
Can I have longer time on that too?
Is there anything else you want to add about homelessness right now?
No, I just think it's something that we have to bring humanity back to society. We have to make sure that we are helping people. And that's one of the things, as a business owner, not as a legislator, but as a business owner, we have been making sure to provide meals to people that have been struggling through the crisis. And one of the populations that we've helped a lot is our homeless population. And my husband and I used our PPP loans and community funds to be able to provide over 3,000 meals since the COVID crisis has hit. And it's hard to see people struggle with getting a meal. So we can do better. And I'm here to work with anybody that wants to work on homelessness, and it's been quite a process.
So, jumping off to another topic.
Yeah, let's go.
I wanted to talk about cannabis just briefly. The state government made some inroads to establish a path forward for interstate commerce. What is your take on what we do next in terms of matching our abundant supply of this crop that Oregon grows so well with demand out of state?
Yeah, this is not one of my areas of expertise. So what I would say is I would want to meet with cannabis growers and state economists to figure out what is best to be able to do and how to do that. I just really I don't want to give you an answer that I don't really know much about that topic.
I'm trying to recall if that was during your time or right before that they pushed that the governor set up that framework. I think it might have been right before you came on.
I think,
but my memory is not sharp on that.
I'm not really sure. I do think that there was a bill that I voted against because it wasn't federally allowed. And so I think that we have to make sure that we have federal pathways and state pathways that connect and can move forward when we're looking at those types of laws and what to do with that. And so I just really don't have a lot of expertise in this area to be able to comment.
Well, I appreciate you not offering any bluster there.
I work hard on all the topics that I work on, and I work hard to educate myself on the ones that I don't know, but I will never claim to be an expert in everything because there's just no way to do so. It's really important for me to have contacts in all industries and be able to reach out to them, which I do from my office in the state capitol frequently, to give them a call and say, hey, there is a law about newborns that I don't know how to work on, or a law on cannabis, and can you help me? And I think that is really important to be able to, not only know your shortcomings, but be able to find people and partners that can help you through that.
Well, before we're almost at the end of our questions. The last one is about gun laws. Do you support strengthening the state's gun laws? And if so, what measures would you take?
Yeah, so I have broke with my party to close the boyfriend loophole and strengthen our gun laws, and so I have done that. I've also brought forward multiple gun laws to strengthen laws around bump stocks, gun safety. I brought a safe storage law forward, and I really believe that we need to find ways to make guns safer, and this is a really important topic, and this is one of the things that I differ with my party on. So that is, that's some of the work that I've done. You can see the laws that I voted on there. I think I have some written down. I've also worked hard to get secure vestibules in place, and that is unfortunately one of the reasons that we put them in place. Not the only reason, but one of them is to help with prevention of a school shooting. And so that has been something that I've also done.
So you're talking about in Ben Lapine schools?
Yeah, in Ben Lapine schools. But I also brought forward a law. I found a pot of money, that was fun, that was in the Awesome Grant for schools that would allow construction to be built for safety vestibules across our state, to make sure that all kids had access to safe entrances, to prevent that from all schools. And that got a hearing but did not get passed.
Okay. So now I just want to offer you the chance to talk about anything that we have not brought up yet.
Oh, wow. Well, I would like to talk about my vaccine bill that I brought forward as a freshman in the minority party and passed. It's the farthest that any vaccine legislation has been able to go to get, combat childhood diseases that we have had eradicated in the past. And I worked with people that opposed it. I amended it 3 times to make sure that it was a strong law and that I listened. And so I've worked very hard on that. I've also worked very hard.
Before you move on to, can you just give a little bit of a recap of what that looked like in terms of what it did, what that bill did?
So it took and it removed the philosophical exemptions from vaccinations because our vaccination rates are dropping below herd immunity in the state of Oregon. And we've saw measles outbreaks in the West Coast and across the country in 2019, and we're also in danger with polio as well. And so making sure that those vaccination rates are strong is really important for our public health. And so I brought forward a bill and listened to people that opposed it and amended it 3 times. One of the things that I amended was to make sure there was only vaccinations that were strong in that they had been required in our state for the last 10 years. Nothing that was new or controversial or could be changed quickly. So I put in a amendment to make sure that stayed in just with those established vaccines. And then also amended it so that we could have more medical exemptions and have the medical providers be accountable to their medical boards instead of our counties, where a lot of our medical exemptions are being declined. And so really honing the process and fixing it to where it was more workable and a better process, and providing safety for our children in the future, and preventing disease spread for public health. So that was a big one that brought a lot of opposition, but I didn't back down, and I'm not afraid to speak my mind and be independent of my party. And that ended up having a very political fallout and died in the Senate. And so I also would like to talk about the bill that I worked hard on for Paid Family Leave Medical Act, which I think through the COVID crisis we have all seen how important it is going to be to have that. And that was a really great collaborative effort between businesses and making sure that we can have a Paid Family Leave Medical Act in our state. And it's the strongest that has been brought forward in the nation so far. So I'm proud of that work as well. And I'm not sure I have more.
You mentioned childcare. I know that's important to you.
Childcare, yeah.
So I don't know if that's another one that you.
Childcare is incredibly important. I had a meeting with childcare providers across the state on Zoom yesterday. I've worked with the governor's office and the emergency board to get more money into childcare. When we're talking about starting up our economy and supporting small businesses, you know, our small businesses are daycare centers, but they also support all the rest of the businesses. I like to call them the hub of the wheel, the center of our economic wheel, and we need to make sure that they have the support to be able to run, and making sure that people are able to take up that as a profession and afford to have a living wage. And so I brought forward a tax credit for $1,500 for each person that worked in a 3-star or above a childcare center. And so I'm hoping to bring that forward again. I'm also working on getting rid of, you know, some regulations that are cost prohibitive. I'm working to help make sure that we can get reimbursement for food that they are using in the preschool promise programs, because right now there's some overlap that they need. We were also having problems during the beginning of COVID with our providers. They're having to go out to the grocery stores, and there was limits on bleach and proteins. And so I wrote a letter from my office to make sure that they, you know, that the supermarket manager could consider that they don't need to go to the grocery store 5 days a week, is what they were telling me, as they were having to go every day to get more bleach and more proteins. And we do not need them working harder. We have to make sure we're supporting them. So I'm working really hard on that. We know that it costs $72 million in our state to support our daycares through September. And so I worked really hard with Karen Power and Representative Zika to get $30 million allocated from the CARES Act out of the emergency board to make sure that we're able to support those child care centers. So that's been some really strong work that I'm continuing to work on, because it's not all allocated out yet, and we need to get that out as soon as possible to our daycare centers.
Thanks. So final thing is just one last pitch to those who are watching. Anything you'd like to say about why voters should vote for you, or what differentiates you from your opponent?
Well, I want to be that moderate, independent voice that represents Bend, to be able to bring forward my years of serving as an elected official on the school board and as a state representative and as a small business owner who values healthcare and education. And I will work hard to earn your vote. I have been disappointed that I do not know my opponent's positions on policies yet, and we are now at the end of September. I believe this is a position that you have to work incredibly hard to earn. And I work hard every day to earn the honor of saying I'm the state representative for the city of Bend. And I have not seen that hard work from my opponent, and that is incredibly disheartening for me, because I don't think that this is a position that you get to walk into. I think you have to work hard and listen and collaborate, and I want to be that person that does that.
Well, just to wrap up, we want to thank you for taking part in the democracy of our of our state and our nation, and we got a friend here visiting. He just wanted to say goodbye. And thank you for your service.
Cute dog for
That's
the
right.
end.
That's right. Thank you for your service thus far to Bend.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot.